Welcome to Spain. This is episode 5 of our series Madrid Strolls. Although today we're cheating a little because we're actually escaping Madrid. Come with us on a day trip, or longer if you feel like it, to one of the most extraordinary places near the capital, San Lorenzo de El Escorial. Right here, in the heart of the Sierra de Guadarrama mountains, stands a vast monastery palace pantheon, built to be the stone heart of Spain, in the time of King Philip II. Today it's a rare mix, the calm vibe of a mountain town, the gravity of a royal residence, and the perfect destination for a quiet day away from Madrid's rush. In this episode, we'll show you how to get here from Madrid, what you really shouldn't miss, and where to take a breather with the best view of El Escorial. So make yourself a coffee, buckle up, and let's go! San Lorenzo de El Escorial sits about 28 miles northwest of Madrid. At the foot of the Sierra de Guadarrama mountains. Today it's an easy train ride, but back in the 16th century it really did feel like the end of the world. Quiet, rugged highlands far from the noise of the capital. Philip II chose this spot very deliberately. Chroniclers wrote about his dream of building a monastery in a kind of a desert, away from other buildings and people. It was meant to be his refuge, a place for prayer, silence and contemplation, but still close enough to Madrid that he could continue ruling his empire. And in fact, on a clear day, from the monastery gardens you can sometimes make out Madrid in the distance with the naked eye. To make things a bit more confusing, El Escorial is basically two towns that function as one. The train from Madrid arrives in the town called El Escorial, that's where you get off. But the famous monastery palace itself is in the neighboring town, San Lorenzo de El Escorial, which sits higher up, closer to the mountains. In practice, though, it all feels like one place. Our plan is to take a direct train from Madrid's Chamartin station. The same station where, on the lowest level, we visited the little metro museum in our previous walk. From there we'll continue on foot. You can hop on a bus almost all the way to the monastery, but then you'd miss a really lovely walk through the shaded park of Parque y Jardines de la Casita del Príncipe. So let's head into the park. Parque y Jardines de la Casita del Príncipe is like a green corridor that gently guides us uphill toward the monastery. Instead of walking along the road, we step straight into a world of paths, trees and shade, which under the Spanish sun makes a real difference. Right in the middle of these gardens stands the Casita del Príncipe, literally the little prince's house. It's an elegant small pavilion from the late 18th century, built as a summer residence for the prince who would later become King Charles IV. From the outside, it looks like a miniature palace, symmetrical, neat and refined, already moving away from El Escorial's severity toward a lighter, more classical style. Today the Casita is usually closed to casual visitors, so most people simply admire it from the outside as they walk by. Both the park path and the final stretch of the route take us uphill. But it's not a particularly demanding climb, even though we're over 3,280 feet above sea level on the slopes of Mount Abantos. The air, even in summer, feels a little cooler than in Madrid. And in winter, you might even get surprised by snow. The whole palace monastery complex is enormous, roughly 650 by 525 feet, like a separate walled city. Everything is built from the same grey stone quarried nearby, local granite, which gives El Escorial its austere, almost fortress-like character. At each of the four corners rises a square tower, crowned with a spire. And closer to the center, taller than the rest, sharp bell towers shoot upward alongside the basilica's round dome. This is no ordinary building. The construction of this monastic residence was a manifesto of a rising absolutism, state power that legitimizes itself solely through God's grace. Philip II was one of the most important rulers of the Counter-Reformation era, when the Catholic Church was responding to the Protestant Reformation. He saw himself as a defender of the faith. He supported the decrees of the Council of Trent, fought Protestantism in the Netherlands. And in art and architecture, he chose gravity, discipline, and a restrained style, modest yet monumental. That is why he so deliberately combined in one place a royal palace, a monastery, and an Augustinian college, as well as the Habsburg Mausoleum. In practice, it is a demonstration of a perfect fusion of secular and religious authority. The king lives here, prays here, and when the time comes, will rest within the same great organism, beside the monks in the shadow of the altar. Philip II entrusted the construction of the complex, designed in the severe style of the late Renaissance, to the best architects of his age. First, Juan Bautista de Toledo, often called the royal architect, and after his death, Juan de Herrera took the helm. The work went on for years, methodically and without haste, from 1563 to 1584, as if someone were patiently assembling an idea in stone, not just putting up a building. And that rectangular, almost military layout is no accident. In Philip II's time, people believed architecture could mirror the ideal order of the world, so El Escorial's plan was read like a symbol. Some saw an allusion to Solomon's temple, others to a gridiron, the instrument of St. Lawrence's martyrdom, the patron saint of this place. The main entrance to El Escorial is on the west side. The facade has 3 doorways. The central one leads into the courtyard of the kings, while the side doors lead to the school and to the monastery. Above the central entrance, set into a niche, is an image of St. Lawrence, the site's patron. The Patio de los Reyes takes its name from the statues that adorn the basilica's facade at the eastern end of the courtyard. They represent kings of Judah, associated with the building or renewal of the temple in Jerusalem. David, Solomon, Hezekiah, Jehoshaphat, Josiah, and Manasseh. Each figure stands about 16 feet tall, carved by Juan Bautista Monegro. They wear stone robes with heads and hands made of white marble, and they carry royal attributes, crowns and details picked out with metal. At the center stand David and Solomon, with inscriptions that echo the idea of building the house of God, underscoring Philip II's vision for El Escorial as a statement of order, faith, and permanence. The Basilica of San Lorenzo El Real is laid out on a Greek cross plan, crowned by a vast dome over the crossing of the naves, inspired by St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The naves are covered by barrel vaults, decorated with frescoes by Luca Giordano, and the main altar, a retablo about 100 feet tall, combines bronze sculpture with paintings, including works by Pellegrino Tibaldi and Federico Zuccari. Beneath the basilica's royal chapel lies the crypt of the royal pantheon, the Pantheon de los Reyes. It is a small octagonal chamber faced in dark marble, with rows of identical metal coffins set into niches. There are 26 in total. Here rest the kings of Spain from the Habsburg and Bourbon dynasties, as well as those queens who were mothers of heirs to the throne, with one notable exception, a royal consort. Before it comes the Pantheon de Infantes, completed in 1888, a group of 9 funerary chapels intended for princes, infantes, and queens who were not mothers of monarchs. This is where figures, often remembered almost as vividly as the rulers themselves, are laid to rest. One of them is Don John of Austria, the illegitimate son of Charles V, acknowledged and brought into the court by Philip II. He became famous as the commander of the Holy League fleet. The victory at Lepanto in 1571 quickly became one of the defining symbols of the age. That is why his tomb in the Pantheon de Infantes is so unusual. Designed by Ponziano Ponzano and executed by Giuseppe Galeotti, it shows him in armor with a sword light across his chest and a lion at his feet. And it's worth stressing one thing here: a non-king depicted with a sword on his tomb is a major distinction, an explicit gesture of honor. It's also said that his sword is a replica and that the original is kept in Madrid's Real Armeria, the royal armory. Let's go back to the basilica for a moment to mention one of the most important Counter-Reformation accents of this place. In line with the rules governing the veneration of saints, reaffirmed by the Council of Trent, Philip II presented the monastery with one of the largest collections of relics in the Catholic world. Deep in the side aisles stand 2 monumental reliquary altars, like great sealed cabinets, decorated by Federico Zuccari. One with the scene of St. Jerome houses relics of male saints. The other, with the Annunciation, is dedicated to women. The royal collection originally was set to include around 7,000 relics, kept in hundreds of reliquaries. Sadly, the number fell dramatically after the Napoleonic invasion. And although the cabinets are usually kept closed today, their very presence in the basilica makes Philip II's Counter-Reformation message unmistakable. Faith was not only meant to be preached, it was meant to be seen. Right next to the presbytery, by the main altar, Philip II arranged his private Casa del Rey, a sequence of plainly furnished rooms without any courtly splendor. The most moving detail is simple. In the bedroom there is a window facing the altar, so the king could take part in Mass even when illness kept him confined to bed. While visiting El Escorial, let's linger a little longer in the library. Within the complex there are as many as 3. One lies behind the basilica choir, while the others, more monastic in character, were over time dispersed among the cells and rooms of the monks, which the Hieromonite gradually adapted to their own needs. The most important, however, is the Royal Library, a public institution enjoying special protection confirmed by a papal bull. From the very beginning, it was meant to be a monumental work of art and one of the pillars of the entire undertaking, almost on a par with the basilica itself. The project was entrusted to Juan Bautista de Toledo and Juan de Herrera, and Philip II took part in the successive stages of its planning. The result was a space that contemporaries regarded as one of the most advanced libraries in Europe, and one of the first on the continent to consciously break with the medieval model of a library. It's even said that Herrera solutions later inspired Domenico Fontana in his work on the Vatican Library. Today what impresses you is not only the history, but the hall itself. About 180 feet long, roughly 30 feet wide, and around 33 feet high, with a marble floor and beautifully carved wooden shelves. The collection holds over 40,000 volumes, and Herrera, together with the Italian engineer Giuseppe Fleccia Gamboa, were thinking not only about display but also about safety. The great armarios were meant to protect the books, reduce the risk of fire, and make the most of natural light. And on this axis of the building, linking the monastery and the seminary, the library becomes a symbol of what Philip II wanted to set in stone here: the union of the spiritual and the physical worlds of prayer and knowledge. As you wander through El Escorial, it's worth stopping at the main staircase, Escalera Principal, in the eastern gallery of the main cloister. These are classical imperial stairs. A broad flight leads to a landing, and then the whole structure splits into 2 symmetrical side flights up to the upper level. The construction itself is truly Herrera-like, simple, monumental, without ornament, and that's precisely why what's overhead hits even harder. Above the staircase stretches a vault covered with a fresco by Luca Giordano from 1692, depicting the glory of the Spanish monarchy. a dynamic arrangement of figures and allegories that draws your gaze upward. It's one of those places where the austere architecture suddenly takes a baroque breath, and the effect is even stronger when you remember just how restrained the whole complex is. Next, let's move on to a place that shows El Escorial in an even more overtly state register, the Hall of Battles. It was a long passageway used for circulation and for escorting visitors. Its exact function isn't entirely clear, but the layout of the decoration suggests it was conceived as a there and back route, guiding the viewer through two parallel narrative cycles. What mattered most, though, was its effect. It was meant to impress and to bolster the prestige of the monarchy through a large-scale war chronicle of Spanish victories. Hence the later enduring name Sala de Batallas. On the south wall, interrupted only by two doorways, runs a monumental sequence depicting the Battle of La Higueruela, the victory of the Castilian army over the Moors of Granada in the Sierra Elvira in 1431. The north wall, in turn, is divided by 9 windows, creating 9 panels for 9 scenes from the war with France, from 5057 and 5058. The central emphasis falls on the Battle of Saint Quentin, the very same event traditionally linked to the foundation of the monastery, and to El Escorial's meaning as a monument to victory and faith. From the Hall of Battles, the route continues in a very logical way, first through the Palace of the Habsburgs, and then into the Bourbon Palace, so you can see the shift of an era step by step. And that shift is immediate. The Bourbons bring in an 18th century decorative program, walls hung with tapestries, frames in gilded moldings, and a full courtly set of furnishings: furniture, chandeliers, clocks, porcelain. You enter this section via Juan de Villanueva staircase and then proceed enfilade through the staterooms and into the private apartments, including the Queen's room with a dressing table and a sewing room. Finally, it's worth stepping out of the interiors onto the terraces on the south and east sides of the monastery, where the Jardín de los Frailes begins, along with the King's and Queen's gardens. From the viewpoints, you can see the Pound, the kitchen gardens of Bosquecillo and Las Herrerías, and beyond them, the mountain range in the distance. These gardens weren't created just for a stroll. Philip II treated them as a practical space for growing vegetables and medicinal plants, but also as a place of pleasure with water, greenery, and flowers. Today they look fairly restrained, but originally they were meant to be full of color. They were even compared to a floral carpet. Sources also mention around 68 varieties of flowers and roughly 400 plants brought from the New World. El Escorial is not only a stone manifesto of power and faith, but also a treasury of Habsburg taste. A place where between the coolness of granite and the hush of the cloisters, their beloved artists still live on: Titian, Bosch, and El Greco. Alright, let's keep going. no longer through the monastery but through the town of San Lorenzo de El Escorial. San Lorenzo de El Escorial is a small town literally at the feet of the monastery. It began as the complex's support settlement and over time spread along the slopes of Mount Abantos in the Sierra de Guadarrama. That's why it has such a distinctive feel: cooler mountain air, plenty of greenery, and the same austere granite in its architecture that we know from El Escorial, only here in a more everyday stroll and coffee in hand version rather than court ceremony. The heart of a walk is usually Plaza de la Constitución, a pleasant square with café terraces, a fountain and benches. An easy place to pause for a moment and simply watch life go by. The town's main axis is Calle Florida Blanca, a street that naturally leads you through the center and along the way reminds you how closely San Lorenzo was tied to the running of the entire complex. You pass buildings that once served as royal back-of-house spaces and residences, such as the Casas de Oficios and the Casas de Infantes. And to finish, if you like taking a little taste of El Escorial with you, be sure to try biscotellas. They're local sweets and an absolute classic here. Sponge cake, a rich egg yolk cream, and chocolate, perfect with coffee or to take away in an elegant box that practically begs to come home with you. And that's where our visit to El Escorial ends, an ideal day trip from Madrid. We started in the park with the monumental monastery and stories that can feel overwhelming in their scale. And we finish in San Lorenzo in the simplest way. A walk through the streets, a moment in the square, a coffee and something sweet for the road. Thanks for being with us in El Escorial. If you enjoy unhurried trips like this, stay with us for the next one. See you on the next journey.